Welcome to Mythic Albion, a journey through Britain's folklore, legends, and sacred landscapes. I'm your host Tom, and today we look at one of the oldest surviving pieces of English literature on this island, Beowulf. Often regarded as the first English epic, it was composed by an unknown Anglo-Saxon poet in the Old English and preserved long before written history. The poem and associated stories were written in England's ancient past. The story itself goes back even further into the Anglo-Saxon world of 6th century Northern Europe. But while this story takes place in pagan Scandinavia, it reflects the very mythic roots of Albion itself. A time where warriors, worms and weird fates mingle. A time of heroes and their incredible feats that would seem superhuman today. Before Arthur drew sword from stone, before Robin Hood's arrows flew through the greenwood, and before William Wallace won an infamous victory at Stirling Bridge, there was Beowulf, a warrior whose deeds would echo down the ages. In the shadows of the North Sea, in the land of mead halls and monsters, a tale was told of courage, blood, and of the doom that awaits even the mightiest of heroes. Grendel, the monster in the mead hall. It is the 6th century in what we know as Denmark today. For 12 winters the monster Grendel has haunted Heorot, the hall of King Hrothgar. It has come from the marshes, uninhabitable mires, and every time he has heard the accursed sound of man. A hulking black shape, half man, half beast. Some say he was a Jotun or a Jotnar, something more akin to the pagan gods and other non-human figures such as dwarves and elves. Others say he was born from the cursed line of the world's first murderer, that of Cain. What is consistent was his hatred for mankind and a love for murder and human blood. Standing as large as those white bears that would come in hidden within storms, starkly contrasted by his skin that was obsidian black. His large forearms looked almost simian. A hole existed where there should be a nose, a mouth absent of lips displaying a cadaver's grin, with horns and spurs that pushed out of his head at strange angles. Small orange eyes sat within deep hollows. He was a terrible sight to behold. He hated that sound of joy emanating from the hall, for he knew he could never partake in it. And thus for 12 winters he visited Heorot to make his own twisted joy, tearing men apart, devouring them whole. Those that were able to stand their ground found their weapons ineffective, their barriers to his entrance unsuccessful. Heorot fell silent. No harp strings, no laughter, only the drip of blood on the rushes. Until one day a stranger came from over the seas, from the land of the Geats. His name was Beowulf, and his strength was said to match that of 30 men. I am Beowulf. My men and I are Geats, and we hear you are having some problems with a monster. This young warrior and battle chief stood over 6 feet tall, blonde hair and a beard that framed hard features. His narrow eyes were like chips of ice. His neck was thick. Every inch of him was heavily muscled and always ready for conflict. King Hrothgar, now a haggard-looking man, came forward.
Beowulf, my boy, if you can do this, you shall have your pick of any treasure, your pick of any woman. But Grendel is fearsome. He pulls men apart as if they were straw dolls and devours them as if they were scraps of meat.
Beowulf felt the battle lust stir within him, balling his hands into fists. "'Tis not gold I seek, but glory and honour. If this beast seeks to tear men apart with his bare hands, then that is what I shall do to him." Beowulf instructed that the hall be prepared, that there shall be merriment, and if this foul creature were to come, he would find the Geats waiting. That night the people of Heorot feasted in that great hall. Much mead was consumed, but when darkness fell, Beowulf ordered that the torches dimmed. He stripped down, shedding chainmail shirt, helmet, his shield and his sword until just his loincloth remained. His warriors bedded down. As they slept, he lay waiting, one blue eye open, while outside the moor whispered with the sound of something stirring.
Men, women, singing, laughter. I will show them my joy.
The front doors were heavily barricaded as always, but Grendel came through them like a black storm, a dark aura emanating from him, the colour of deep blue sea. He has bespelled himself, Beowulf thought, one eye forever watching this demon. Grendel scooped up a warrior as if he were a bag of sticks, one huge hand on one of the man's legs, another around his torso. He pulled this man in two. Blood and carnage rained down on the creature's face. The other warriors were stirring now, as Grendel's shadow blotted out the firelights, but he didn't even consider them. He was reaching for another until suddenly, it was Grendel's arm that was seized. Flesh against flesh, sinew against sinew. The hall shook with the fury of their struggle as they grappled. The protector of nobles had no intention to let this killer guest walk free. He did not count the days of Grendel's life of use to any of the people. Beowulf's warriors all drew their weapons, time-honoured heirlooms. Hard men, battle warriors, swinging from every side, but not even the sharpest of blades could make an impact. Bespelled indeed. Beowulf and Grendel crashed into the eastern wall of the hall, tables and stools scattering. Grendel tried to batter at this man with his free arm. The chief of the Geats buried his forehead into the son of Cain's face. For the first time in his life, Grendel felt fear. Beowulf twisted the arm of his foe, once, twice. Grendel howled in pain. Beowulf delivered a fierce blow to underneath the shoulder. Something cracked. Beowulf could feel club-like forearms coming down on his back, but he shrugged this off, suppressed the pain, and drove his fist again and again underneath that twisted shoulder. The arm was cracking. A gaping tear opened at the shoulder. Tendons popped, muscle slipped bone. Beowulf pushed his foot against the side of Grendel's face, and with a blood-curdling scream and a final wrench, rips the arm off, shoulder included. Grendel howled and stood in terror and death. He fled into the marshes, for he now coveted the mere. Beowulf stood in that doorway and lifted his trophy above him. He roared into the night like a thunderclap. In the morning, they hung Grendel's arm from the rafters. The people of Herorot rejoiced. But the marshes never sleep for long, and every victory in Albion comes with a price. Grendel's mother, the Avenger in the Deep. Danes and Geats celebrated from sunset to sunrise. The demon was slain. His arm hung high as a warning to the dark. The hall was filled again with laughter, song and praise. But beneath the mist that covered the mere, something moved, something terrible, something ancient, a grief older than men and twice as deep. For every monster, there is a mother, and grief is a weapon sharper than any sword. When all were asleep, she came, swift, silent, a shadow gliding between the torches and tables. Her talons flashed. A man was taken, Hrothgar's most trusted advisor, Aesir. So was Grendel's arm, Aesir's arm in its place. In the morning, Beowulf ordered his men to prepare for battle. Beowulf, knowing peace never lasts, took up his armour once more and followed the blood trail to the marshes. They followed the trail to a lake black as iron. The head of Aesir lay at the lip. The waters writhed. Through currents or through its inhabitants, Beowulf cared little for either. The depths swallowed light, and soon it had swallowed our hero, made ready to face what no man had faced before. He swam for what seemed like hours, but was he not Beowulf, with lungs like that of a great bear? Down through the dark, through the cold, when it seemed he was surrounded by icy oblivion. And then he was suddenly falling, not through water, but through air. He crashed down onto rock, on coral, and looked up. The lake was there, aye, but the bottom hung above him some 10 feet in the air. What witchcraft was this? This cavern was illuminated around him. Shards of dark light, witch light, rippled over the walls. And there, on a plinth, was the dead body of Grendel. Something fell out of the water behind him. He spun around, drawing, fronting his sword. Nothing. Then from behind him in a rock pool, something was emerging. Its skin was a hue of golden to green, and the creature resembled something of an anthropomorphic hammerhead, enough to drive the senses of a rational man insane. She made no sound as she snaked towards this killer. But Beowulf was canny, and seeing her shadow lengthening in front of him, swung his blade behind him at full strength, but it failed him. This ancient and rare sword, born of humility, it had barely cleaved a half-inch into her neck. "You killed my son, mortal. I shall remove pieces from you for 100 years. Beowulf was flung backwards by a backhand. The strength of this creature, this thing that named itself Grendel's mother, was many times beyond even her foul progenies. Beowulf crashed against a wall and fell to his knees. He spat blood and immediately rushed this creature without hesitation. He would bludgeon this thing if he had to. Sword in his right hand, he grabbed her shoulder and with all his weight hurled her to the ground. He welcomed the battle at hand and hoisted his sword above his head, but he was dismayed to see it vanishing like wisps of smoke from a dying torch. She promptly repaid this present of his, and her ruthless arms enveloped him in an embrace, spinning him round. Beowulf struggled. He felt his strength draining. Was this magic or futility? A dagger appeared in her hand, summoned out of the air as if drawing in the witchlight around them. It looked like a giant shark's tooth. "For my kinsman," she crowed. She drew the weapon across Beowulf's chest. She hacked and stabbed at his torso, but the dagger was repelled by his chainmail vest. In a furious rage, she threw Beowulf again, and he hit another part of the cavern. Something felt broken inside. He knew he couldn't allow her to get close again. And then he saw something mighty on the floor, a magnificent bright heavy blade. Far too large to be wielded by a mortal man, it was a huge slab of iron that was surely a giant sword. He pushed the hilt up and hauled himself up. He could hear her coming now. She was screaming an unholy sound. He took in a breath. Beowulf met her in kind. He was also screaming. Their voices became a battle chorus. He dragged that huge blade behind him as he ran, chips and coral flying up behind him. The sword came up over him, the tip trailed through the bottom of the lake and crashed down. The impact sounded like a warhammer. Grendel's mother was bisected and her head also separated. Such was the devastation of this weapon. She toppled to the ground in pieces. The sword was blood wet. The man rejoiced, and the cave trembled. Grendel's dead body lay motionless as ever on the plinth, and suddenly it jerked up awry. Another heavy swipe of this massive sword had severed Grendel's head. Then a foul smell filled the air. The blood from these creatures was corrosive, volatile, acidic. This most magnificent of sword hissed and smote until all that was left was handle and hilt. On the surface it had been nearly 9 hours. The Danes and the Geats stare at the surface, naught but sorrow in their hearts. Surely the monster had slain their great champion, too much even for he called Beowulf. Hardly anyone speaks. And then Something breaks the surface with a gasp of air and sunlight. All the men draw their swords, preparing for one last battle. For a moment they believe Grendel has returned, but no, it is Beowulf, giant head in one hand, giant sword hilt in the other, and then he collapses with exhaustion. He had slain grief itself, but even heroes cannot kill sorrow. Two monsters slain in as many days. But is she a monster, or just a grieving mother? Vengeance born of love, fierce as any god's, and so the world turns, light and shadow, blood and song, each giving birth to the other. The Dragon. 50 winters pass. The monsters were gone and the hall rebuilt. Beowulf, once the stranger from across the sea, now ruled his own land. Peace had come, but does peace ever truly last? Beneath the earth, an ancient dragon slumbers, perhaps for 300 years or more. Its hoard lay deep in a stone barrow, gold, gems, armour, the wealth of 100 kingdoms and long-forgotten kings. Sleeping, content in the dark, until a thief crept in and stole a single cup. The dragon woke, and with its fury, so did doom. It had never encountered Geats before, but it had slain many races of men like them in so many different ages. It came by night, fire and death upon its wings, breathing death fire, villages burned, the air thick with ash. A single fireball obliterated Beowulf's own hall. The king of the Geats' land was being destroyed. And the old king knew the time of monsters was not yet done. The king orders that he be brought the biggest shield, one forged of iron, and his own sword nagling. Rather than raise an army, Beowulf summons 11 of the finest Geatish warriors, and the thief who set this terrible tragedy into motion, and makes for the barrow of the beast. Outside the barrow, the proud king recounts stories of courage, yore and honour to the men. Past deeds and acts of heroism. He states that should this be his final battle, then so be it, but the land of the Geats will endure. This he promises while one iota of strength remains within him. The aging king walks to the entrance of the cave, and banging nailing on the front of his shield, bellows a challenge to the dragon. At first there is nothing, and then two eyes appear, bright yellow, almost impossible to look at for long. There is at first a rumble, and then a blast of flame projects straight into Beowulf. Taking refuge behind his shield, not only is the heat almost unbearable, but he feels himself being pushed back. His shield will surely falter. Then the dragon is loping out of the cave, red, magnificent, with a mane the colour of gold, jets of flame shooting out into the air. Of the 11 men and the thief, all flee in abject terror save for one. Wiglaf, son of Weohstan, young, untested, loyal. He sees his lord falter, his great iron shield glowing red under the relentless fire. And though others ran, Wiglaf stood. Shame on us if we let him fall. We swore to stand beside him, and so I will, though flame may take me, Wiglaf cries. The dragon's attention was now on this young upstart, and hurled white-hot fire at the warrior. Wiglaf's shield, unlike Beowulf's, was made of wood. The fire advanced in waves and burned Wiglaf's shield down to the boss. His chainmail would not afford much protection, but the young spear warrior continued onward. The roar of the dragon was deafening, the intensity of the flame was blinding, an assault on the senses itself. Wiglaf could no longer hear himself think, yet he pressed on. And when it seemed Wiglaf would be obliterated where he stood, there was a moment of silence, a moment of clarity. A large shadow loomed over him, cooling and protective. The large shield of Beowulf now stood firm between the young soldier and the dragon. The mighty silhouette of the king looked down, hellfire at his back like a tsunami. Your honor and courage speaks to me, boy, that you would risk death in the face of insurmountable odds. But today is not the day you die. My shield will not afford us protection for much longer. You look like you have a strong arm. Hold it steady. I will go around and smoke this dragon once and for all. Together they faced the beast. The War King, remembering past deeds, stepped out and swung Nadine down on the dragon's head with the force of 30 men. The sword broke, ancient steel shattered like glass, with a single shard remaining in the dragon's scaly head. It was said some dragons had skulls made of diamond, or perhaps Beowulf's strength was such that any sword wielded was overstrained. The dragon swiped at the iron shield, now resembling melted slag, throwing Wiglaf to one side, and charged Beowulf. Its jaws went for the king's neck. Beowulf, using his mighty hands, tried to hold it open vice-like jaws, but he felt teeth slowly penetrating his neck like poisonous tusks. If this is it, then so be it, Beowulf grimaced to himself. Wiglaf, drawing his shining ornamented sword, refused to abandon his king. Noticing a vent at the base of the dragon's neck, Wiglaf drove his sword up to the hilt into that opening. The dragon's fire seemed to abate, but Wiglaf's hand was charring. It was as if he had placed it directly into a forge. Young warrior and wyvern were locked, both in pain, both trying to pull away from the other. Beowulf somehow got to his feet. Bloody, dark lifeblood flowed out in waves from his wounds. Poison was already running through his veins. It was as if dragon fire itself was within him. Drawing a dagger from his belt, he looped a mighty arm around the dragon's neck under those fearsome draws, pushing Wiglaf away. The dragon tried to writhe free, but Beowulf held him firm. With a last ounce of strength, he plunged his dagger above the opening that Wiglaf had made and wrenched up. The dragon fell, its wings folded, its fires gutted out. They felled their foe, courage took their life. They were more than nobles, they were kinsmen, and together they had destroyed the dragon. But victory comes at a price. The dragon's venom had found its mark. Beowulf sank to the ground, his breath shallow. His vision first started to swim, then dimmed. The young warrior knelt beside his king.
I've held this land in peace, fought monsters, guarded men. Now the fire takes me. Bring me the gold within the barrow.
The treasure is yours, lord. You have won it all.
Nay, boy. No man owns what the earth shall claim. Build me a mound by the sea, so sailors may see it and speak my name and remember.
Beowulf closed his eyes, and the light of his age went out. Although Beowulf was written in the Old English, the language of early medieval England, the story itself is set in Scandinavia, mainly what we know of as Denmark and Sweden today. The Anglo-Saxons were originally from this region. Before they began to settle in Britain around the 6th century, Anglo-Saxons came from parts of Germany, Denmark and southern Scandinavia. Thus, the world of Beowulf reflects the heroic culture and ancestral memories of their homeland, a story about their forebears. It reflects cultural continuity, not geography. For the Anglo-Saxons, telling stories about Danes, Geats, Swedes was not foreign, it was part of their identity. The poem itself was thought to have been written sometime between the 8th and 10th century and represents tales from much older traditions. So even though Beowulf is the earliest surviving English poem, it is not about England. It's about the roots of the people that would eventually become the English. Beowulf is a part of the English. Despite the passage of time, the legend of Beowulf persists, carried on from the breath of poets, sung beside fires, whispered in mead halls and monasteries. The author of the poem remains unknown to this day. The manuscript, fragile, ink on calfskin, has survived plagues, wars, and even a fire that consumed the library at Ashburnham House in 1731. Scorched, blackened, but stubbornly surviving, much like the hero himself. There are many, many themes that run throughout the poem of Beowulf. Heroism, inspiration, courage, humility, loyalty, hope, inner strength as well as outer. And that's the strange magic of these tales. They are both legend and truth. They remind us that every age has its monsters, but it also has its heroes to face that threat. And sometimes it can be hard to discern the two. In the end, Beowulf's treasure was not gold, it was remembrance. A story surviving centuries, burned, broken, and yet unforgotten. So when the dark closes in and the fire burns low, remember the old songs of Albion sung in mead halls, and the warrior who brought the night so that the dawn may come again. Thank you for listening to this episode of Mythic Albion. If you like hearing this epic today, leave a review and share with a fellow enthusiast. It helps others find their way to the hero's path. But for now, the hero's fire has expired. Beowulf's mound still stands by the grey sea, a monument to courage and the grave cost of it. As the ages turned, the songs faded, and Britain changed. The language changed. The swords were sheathed, the mead halls fell silent, and in their place rose towers of stone. We step back into the world of kings and prisoners, where power, not monsters, became the threat. In the heart of London stands a fortress, built by conquerors, guarded by superstition, haunted, some might say, by every poor soul it has ever held. They call it the Tower. Its stones remember. They have seen the fall of princes, the curse of jewels, and the black wings of ravens that must never leave their walls, lest the kingdom itself shall fall. Next time we walk the path through those gates and listen to the echoes.